In the aftermath of the fatal crash that claimed the lives of video game legend Vince Zampella and an unidentified passenger on Angelo's Crest Highway Sunday afternoon, investigators from the California Highway Patrol face a complex reconstruction effort to understand what transpired in the final moments before the 2026 Ferrari 296 GTS veered off the winding mountain road. The crash, which occurred at approximately 12:45 p.m. near mile marker 62, as the red Ferrari exited one of the highway's tunnels, has left authorities with more questions than answers, particularly regarding the stark contrast in outcomes for the two occupants. One trapped in the inferno that consumed the luxury sports car, the other ejected from the vehicle entirely. The preliminary investigation reveals that Zampella, 55, was driving the Ferrari southbound on the scenic but notoriously challenging two-lane highway when, according to the CHP's official statement, for unknown reasons, the vehicle veered off the roadway, struck a concrete barrier, and became fully engulfed. Those few words belie the intensive forensic work now underway to piece together the sequence of events that led to such catastrophically different fates for driver and passenger. Video footage obtained by authorities from a witness shows the Ferrari emerging from the Angeles Crest tunnel at what appears to be considerable speed, the car visible on the pavement as tire and skid marks that will form crucial evidence in determining whether braking occurred, when it occurred, and with what force. The question of ejection versus entrapment presents investigators with one of their most critical lines of inquiry. Modern vehicles, particularly high-performance sports cars like the Ferrari 296 GTS, are engineered with sophisticated restraint systems designed to keep occupants secured within the protective cage of the vehicle during impacts. The fact that one occupant was thrown clear while the other remained trapped suggests several possible scenarios that crash reconstruction experts will methodically examine. The most fundamental question centers on seatbelt usage. Was the ejected passenger wearing a seatbelt at the time of impact? Federal safety data consistently shows that ejection from a vehicle is far more likely when occupants are unrestrained, and in high-speed collisions, the forces involved can be sufficient to throw an unbelted passenger through windows or even through compromised body panels. However, ejection can occur even when seatbelts are worn if the forces involved are severe enough to cause structural failure of the mounting points. If the seatbelt itself fails due to defect or improper maintenance, or if the angle and nature of the impact create conditions where the restraint system cannot function as designed. The Ferrari 296 GTS, a mid-engine hybrid sports car capable of producing over 819 horsepower, would have been traveling at sufficient speed upon exiting the tunnel to generate enormous kinetic energy in any collision scenario. The concrete barrier that the vehicle struck would have represented an essentially immovable object, creating a near-instantaneous deceleration that subjects occupants to forces measured in tens or even hundreds of times the force of gravity. Investigators will examine the seatbelt mechanisms from both the driver's and passenger's positions. looking for evidence of load-in, the telltale stretching, fraying, or stress marks that indicate a belt was under tension during the crash. They will photograph and document the position of the seatbelt buckles, checking whether they show signs of having been latched at the time of impact. If the passenger's belt was fastened, the investigation will focus on understanding what could have caused the ejection despite this safety measure. The integrity of the passenger compartment will be scrutinized in a fire as intense as the one that engulfed this Ferrari. Determining the pre-fire condition of doors, windows, and the roof structure becomes challenging, but not impossible, as fire investigators are trained to distinguish between damage caused by impact versus damage caused by subsequent thermal exposure. The positioning of the occupants within the vehicle at the moment of impact could also explain the divergent outcomes. If the passenger had, for instance, been turned in the seat to reach for something in the back, leaning forward to adjust climate controls, or otherwise not seated in the standard upright position, the dynamics of the crash could have altered dramatically. The Ferrari's mid-engine configuration places the passenger compartment relatively forward in the vehicle, and the specific angle at which the car struck the concrete barrier, whether it was a direct frontal impact, an angled collision, or a side-swiping glance that then rotated the vehicle, would determine how forces were distributed through the passenger cell and where the points of greatest stress occurred. The fire that trapped Zampella adds another layer of complexity to the investigation. Modern high-performance vehicles carry significant quantities of fuel, and hybrid vehicles like the Ferrari 296 GTs also contain high-voltage battery systems that present their own risks in crash scenarios. The rapid development of the fire, visible in witness video as a fireball that erupted within seconds of the initial impact, suggests either a catastrophic rupture of the fuel system or a failure of the hybrid battery pack, or potentially both. Crash investigators will work with fire forensics experts to determine the point of origin of the blaze, which will help establish whether the fire contributed to Zampella's inability to escape, or whether he was already incapacitated by injuries sustained in the impact itself. The question of why Zampella could not escape raises several investigative avenues. In severe frontal crashes, driver entrapment can result from intrusion of the engine compartment into the driver's footwell, effectively pinning the driver's legs and preventing egress even if the driver remains conscious. The steering column, despite modern collapsible designs, can also become a source of entrapment if the collision is severe enough. Alternatively, the impact forces may have caused injuries, head trauma, spinal damage, internal bleeding that rendered Zampella unconscious or unable to move, leaving him helpless as the fire spread. Witness accounts describe bystanders attempting to reach the vehicle but being driven back by the intensity of the flames, suggesting that even if Zampella had been conscious and physically able to attempt escape, the fire may have already created conditions that made survival impossible. The investigation will necessarily examine whether alcohol, drugs, or medical conditions played any role in the crash. Standard toxicology testing will be performed as part of the autopsy process, though results typically take weeks to complete. Investigators will also request Zampella's medical records to determine if any underlying health conditions, cardiac issues, seizure disorders, diabetes-related complications could have caused a sudden incapacitation at the wheel. The challenge of driving Angeles Crest Highway with its tight curves, elevation changes, and limited margin for error means that even a momentary lapse in attention or a brief medical event could prove catastrophic. The passenger's identity remains undisclosed as authorities work to notify next of kin, leaving investigators and the public to wonder about the relationship between the two individuals. Whether this was a planned drive on a road known to attract performance car enthusiasts, or perhaps a business outing that took a tragic turn. The passenger's injuries from ejection and the subsequent death at the hospital indicate that the trauma sustained was severe enough to prove fatal despite medical intervention, though the specific nature of those injuries has not been made public and may not be until final autopsy reports are complete. Vehicle data recorders, commonly known as black boxes, will provide crucial information about the Ferrari's speed braking steering inputs and throttle position in the seconds leading up to the crash, assuming these systems survived the fire with readable data intact. But modern performance cars, like the Ferrari 296 GTS, record extensive telemetry data, and this information will help investigators understand whether the driver was attempting to slow down, whether the car experienced any mechanical failure, and what the vehicle's dynamics were at the moment control was lost. The California Highway Patrol's investigation will ultimately produce a comprehensive report detailing their findings, but that process takes time, typically months, for a fatal crash of this complexity. For now, the scene on Angeles Crest Highway serves as a somber reminder of how quickly lives can change. How the same forces that make high-performance vehicles thrilling can become instruments of tragedy, and how, even in death, the human story leaves investigators with profound questions about what happened in those final moments. Questions they methodically work to answer through evidence, science, and dedicated investigation. Seeking truth for the families left behind and closure for a gaming community mourning an irreplaceable creative force taken far too soon.